The determination of Egypt will be done by the people of Egypt. The U.S., again, can stand by, we can support the basic human rights of the people of Egypt. We have called on President Obama, has spoken with President Mubarak, expressed to him directly his concern about the issues on the street, the violence on the street, and has called for restraint by the government. He has also called for restraint by the people who have been out on the street. But it's a very fluid situation, and so the president is monitoring it very closely, and we hope that it works itself out for the people of Egypt.
Let's talk about the situation closer to home. The president in his State of the Union message the other night mentioned jobs 45 times. Mm-hmm. When do you expect unemployment to start going down?
Well, we hope as you begin to see progress made in the economy that the job situation will change. It's expected based by outside economists and observers that the lame duck session of Congress and the deal that was made on the tax issues has the possibility to create significant growth in 2011, and we expect that will result, obviously, in job creation.
But when?
We've seen
a month from now, 6 months from now?
I don't think, Bob, you can look. We've come out of the deepest recession in the history of our country since the Great Depression. We expect this year, if the growth estimates by outside people are met, that we will begin to see that happen, and that's a good thing because we have too many Americans, obviously, that are out of work.
It was pretty deep in his speech the other night before the president finally got around to talking about the deficit. He proposed to freeze the domestic spending, discretionary spending, for 5 years at the current levels, but not many details beyond that. Can you give us some details on where he plans to cut above and beyond this holding this freeze on domestic spending?
Well, I can. First of all, let me just say that freeze on domestic spending over 10 years will result in about a $400 billion cut. That will cause the lowest non-security, discretionary funding of the U.S. government to the point since Dwight Eisenhower was president. So it's substantial. Secretary Gates has been out and talked about $78 billion in cuts in the Defense Department. And when the president presents his budget later in February, you will see significant cuts throughout the discretionary budget. Such as he mentioned, the community, CSBG it's called, it's for community action groups. He's going to cut that in half, but he's also going to reformulate it from a formula-based grant of money to a similar to the Race to the Top. So it would be based upon performance in these community actions. So I think what you're seeing, and you will see great detail come the budget in about 2.5 weeks.
Well, could you give us a little preview of some of those details?
Well, I don't want to do such a preview this early. I think the president will do that. The budget will be very specific. You'll see over the next couple of weeks a number of items, specific changes.
There was one other thing the president was fairly vague on, and that was his proposal to reorganize the government. And I got to tell you, every president that I've covered in the 42 years I've been in Washington has been going to reorganize the government, and it usually winds up just like it is. Is he really serious about that? What is he planning to do, and have you decided will someone be in charge of that?
The first performance officer chief performance officer for the U.S. government, Jeff Zients, will be in charge of the reorg effort. I think we're going to look at some fairly easy coming together. We have a number of agencies right now that deal with exports and trade, and I think we're going to take a first look at those agencies who do work well together today. But there's no doubt that this government, and you said people have talked about this for many years, but this government is structured basically mid last century, not for the 21st century. There's enormous duplication. So I think you're going to see a very concerted effort by the president, no doubt about it. It's a major task. And we want to work with Congress to make sure that we get this right, whatever changes we propose.
One of the first big votes that Congress is going to take is going to be on raising the debt ceiling. Republicans say they want something if they're going to vote to raise the debt ceiling. What can you promise them? What are you prepared to tell them?
Well, as the president said, we're prepared to sit down and work out something. No one wants the government to go into default. We've seen governments around the world go into default, and considering we are just beginning to come out of this great recession we were in, any thought, any concept of trying to use the debt ceiling as some sort of threat or leverage will run the possibility of spooking the markets, and the American people should be quite concerned about that. So we plan to sit down with the Congress, the congressional leaders, both parties. Obviously, as the president said, no deal can be struck without it being bipartisan. So we're going to work with the Congress as we go forward. I think it would be an important step as they look at our budget, see how serious the president is in cutting that budget, and that hopefully will begin to lay the foundation for a vote that extends the debt ceiling, and at the same time, we are all in agreement that there must be cuts in spending.
All right. Well, let's take a little break here. We'll come back. We'll talk about health care, what you see ahead on that, and sort of the politics of all of this in a minute. We're back now with the new White House Chief of Staff, William Daley. Mr. Daley, when your appointment was announced, big business, the Chamber of Commerce, and frankly, a lot of Republicans were delighted because as far as big business goes, you're part of it. You were a part of business, although you have a long political background. Do you think that the administration went too far in demonizing Wall Street and business, and is your appointment a signal that that is going to change?
No, I don't think it's about demonizing Wall Street or listen, there were serious difficulties in the nation, and the president was very direct to the business community, to the political system, that we have to make changes. We have to do certain things. No question, there were lots of abuses over the years, not only in business, but in government and excesses that took place. And the president was very direct. Some people take umbrage at the fact that they're scolded by a president. But when you consider the depth of the problems that this president faced, he was very blunt, very direct. He speaks bluntly in a positive way about the business community when they should be praised and other institutions. But when there's real reason for criticism, this president won't shy from doing that.
It's not hard to figure out that you didn't like the president's health care plan. You said so when it was passed, when you were in private enterprise. You said it basically went too far. Do you think it ought to be changed, and where?
No, what I was commenting on was the politics, really, of the movement, of the moment around health care. I thought it was a very difficult climate to try to accomplish what they tried to, and I think the results, because of the misinterpretation of health care by many people, had a negative impact on Democrats. But I absolutely believe, having been in business and hearing from business people the importance of a need for the reform of health care, it was the business community that was really saying to the politicians, this is costing us too much. It's too much of a wet blanket on the economy.
So do you think that the plan that they passed is just perfect and should be left alone? Or
no, the president has said he's open to changes to this. He is not open to refighting the entire fight of health care. People have suggestions on how to make it better, but he's not in favor of fighting this fight.
The president made quite a point in his State of the Union message to talk about the infrastructure and what we need to do to overhaul it and improve it. People on all sides seem to agree that it does need some work. What he didn't talk about is how do you pay for that? How are you going to pay for that?
Well, I think you'll see in the budget an attempt to pay for an expansion in that. I think there's a lot of interest. We've heard from the private sector to come in and finance some of the high-speed rail. Even foreign governments and foreign companies have talked about coming in to finance some of these projects. If there's a public partnership, I think that's a creative way to go forward.
Do you think the president would ever entertain raising the gas tax, the gasoline tax, to pay for some of that?
I don't think raising the taxes on the American people right now is the way to go in this point of our economy. But we want to sit down with the leadership of Congress as we work through the deficit, as we work through the other issues, and talk about the possibilities. The reality is, as certain people in the Republican Party have said, there's no way they're going to look for any revenue raising in any way, shape, or form. That puts a tremendous constraint on, obviously, the budget and the deficit.
The Republicans are also talking about coming in there and whacking $55 billion out of this year's budget, the 2012 budget. Do you think figures like that are actually feasible? Is that realistic?
Well, you know, it's the old saying, where's the beef? Let's see exactly the cuts they're talking about and see whether the American people believe that those such cuts albeit we all agree there must be cuts to this government. And again, you're going to see this president lay out a very substantial cut. Already the freeze amounts to $400 billion over 10 years. Again,
it's going to take a lot more than that.
It will take a tremendous amount more than that. And we've got to work our way over many years. We got in this hole over many years. You're not going to get out of it. You cannot. No business, when they get in trouble, just cuts and has much of a business when the cycle comes back. What the president has talked about is investing. And the time to invest while you're cutting is to take some of those cuts, invest them in things that will have a return as you come out of this recession. That's what successful companies do, and that's what the government's got to do.
The president has been heard to say to people in the White House that he feels like he can do business with Mitch McConnell. He thinks he can do business with John Boehner. But he's not sure that they can do business with the Tea Party. What do you see happening here? Do you think Republicans can come together and find a way to present some sort of a united front to work with the president or to oppose the president?
I would hope that they come together to work for the American people along with the president. We have divided government. Nothing's going to get done unless it's done with Republicans and Democrats coming together. Obviously, there's factions in the Republican Party that may have the attitude, say no to everything in anticipation of an election next year. The American people do not want to wait around for almost 2 years to see some serious addressing of these problems by the political system. They're going to expect us all to do that. And there is disagreement amongst Democrats. But the president has said he's willing to sit down because we must have progress. And the only way we have progress, and this may be a good thing out of the situation of November and the election, is that is the parties have got to come together, or else the American people are going to hold everybody accountable. And people who think that they've got some great benefit by just saying no, they're saying no to the American people, not to this president.
Bill Daley, we hope you'll come back many times while you're in the White House. Thank you for being with us.